My name is Alex. Question is open to both, but somewhat more focused to Mr. Murray. In your book, you refer a lot to the dichotomy of identities between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. My family is from Eastern Europe, from Romania, where we have a very deep relationship to perhaps not being particularly observant in religion, but being Eastern Orthodox. Many of our saints fall into very much this idea of protecting Europe from the Ottoman attack, for which we, for hundreds of years, were both subject to, 500 years, and fought against. And it's this new type of narrative that we do speak about. I'd like to get some more impressions on not only how you see that as a potential solution. You speak specifically about Slovakia and Poland, I reckon. Poland is doing a little bit different thing right now at the moment with their history. But if you see a solution in this sort of not necessarily virulent nationalism that we experienced in the 90s in places like Yugoslavia, but rather, do you see as a corrective model in Western European identities by saying, as you say, sort of revisit the paths that you've developed from potentially in a church?
That's a very interesting question. Basically, for this book, I mean, as well as traveling for some years to a lot of the countries that people have been fleeing from, both as asylum seekers and as economic migrants, I'd also spent recent years traveling across the continent from north to south, east to west, meeting a lot of migrants, for instance, who just come off the boats, the Greek and Italian islands, speaking to a lot of refugees, migrants, and so on, and following the conversations all the way up to the chancelleries of Europe. And yes, you're right. I mean, I came to the decision that the recognition fairly early on that there was a totally different view in the former Eastern European countries and the Western European countries. And look, I mean, this could all get very messy. I have no doubt about that. And I'm aware of what in some of these countries not very distant history has been. And we're always walking on precipices of some kind. My view is that the reason why they have a totally different view towards mass migration and other related issues is because not only they had a history for hundreds of years fighting with the Ottoman Empire, pushing them back from the gates of Vienna and much more, but because of what I think of as the 20th century issue. I mean, we in Britain, like you in America, we never had the Nazis in our country. They made it to the Channel Islands in the UK, but we didn't see populations rounded up and sent to the death camps. And
you did see a lot of bombs, though.
We saw a lot of bombs, it's true. And these things do remain in the memory for a long time, and rightly so. And my view is that Eastern Europe learnt one of the worst things imaginable, which is that you can have your entire country and your culture destroyed from one direction, and just as you think you might get above the surface and breathe, it gets totally destroyed from another direction. I mean, to have lived under fascism and communism in the space of a few decades, and to have only come out of it quite recently, is bound to have an effect on you that is different from your view of the world if you were born and brought up in New Jersey. It's going to affect it, and I suppose the thing it comes down to for me is this: is that. And I am, broadly in agreement with what some of the countries in Eastern Europe have done in recent years in this regard. I think they know what I think was being a very important lesson, which is to be careful with your present and to be careful with your future, and not to carry out experiments on your country that you don't know how they'll turn out. Just to be careful with your future, because you don't know. You could screw it all up in new ways. And in Western Europe, there's a lot of things we're coming across which we never expected to come across because we hadn't planned, and it didn't mean any of it to happen. And I think in Eastern Europe they have a different view. So I just say that it's not an argument for people being illiberal or being anti-democratic or anything like it. I think people should be very careful, because this is, for most people, the only vessel they have to live in. And if it's screwed up, you've screwed up the only thing they've got. So be careful. This doesn't seem to me to be a very extreme position, but sadly it's regarded by some as being so. But I, at any rate, still hold to it.
Yeah, and for clarity, because I've heard you talk about this before, you're not anti-immigration.
No.
You are...
I'm anti-totally unbounded and unrestricted and uncontrolled people walking in, just, flowing in on boats without anyone knowing who they are, by, as happened in 2015, the millions. And I've seen the strain it puts on societies. I've seen the strain it puts on the liberals. And it's going to be very difficult.
And I'm curious, thank you for your question, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I'm deeply honored to have gotten a ticket to be here tonight. And
Well, likewise, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a little bit of a I don't even know what the right word is. From a pragmatic standpoint, I understand there are nations and borders, and there are good practical reasons to make sure that we're not just, having wide open borders that anybody can cross and we don't know what's going on and where all this. On the other hand, in the purely impractical utopian sense, I have no actual objection to a one world government, a one planet community where we are about human beings. I don't think we're anywhere near that as far as, but I don't see a problem, and maybe this comes from I don't have some cherished culture that I'm trying to protect any more than I'm trying to protect humanity. And I don't know if there's any practical way to get there. Well, but I could certainly envision, and I don't mean just to go down like the Star Trek route, but a system where you don't have the border.
Yeah, but I mean, I spend a fair amount of time in this country, and one of the things I have observed is that not absolutely everybody is happy with your current president. Imagine if you were trying to elect a world leader in a borderless world, and who you might get.
Well,
you would actually get President Xi for life.
Yes, and I would actually, so I am a fan of other voting principles, a ranked voting system, and I'm a fan of other modes of...
So you're in favor of a rigged voting system?
Ranked.
Oh, ranked.
Where you rank your potential candidates.
Thank God for that.
So that
it was an important thing to clarify.
Yeah. but also, I like the idea of a council with checks and balances. I like the way our constitutional system works with checks and balances, but I don't think you need a president. And actually, in many places, the leader isn't the leader.
I want to talk about a remarkable phenomenon that is going on in Asia and Africa, namely the large-scale conversion of Muslims to Christianity. There was a complaint by a guy on Al Jazeera who said that by his count, 6 million Muslims are converting to Christianity each year.
Christians have been saying two things. Number one, God is eternal. Eternal meaning not living forever on and on and on. Eternal in the sense of outside of time. And this concept of eternity, which seemed from a scientific point of view incoherent, now makes complete sense. If God is outside the universe, He's outside of time.
Far from being unable to escape God, there is a very real contingent of non-believers, and I would count myself among their number, who are unable by any means to discover Him, who seek and do not find, who knock and receive, as it were, no answer. I think it would be great if God existed. I really do. I would absolutely love to escape death. I would relish being the recipient of unconditional love. Less selfishly, I would love to be able to worship that which deserves to be worshipped. I just don't think it's true. Now, try as I might, look where I can, I find no response, no hint, nothing.